I'm Lucy.
And I'm Jennifer.
You're listening to Everything I Know About.
Each week, we share everything we know about a new topic, equipped with some internet research and a little too much exposure to pop culture. Well, hey, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
So we're going to have more of a personal episode today. I've been going through it the past few months with a breakup, and I have found a lot of solace personally in listening to other people's experiences with breakups and listening to podcasts. Like one of my favorite Bingetopia episodes, and you know, we're big Bingetopia stans over here, is when Julia was going through her breakup and she shared her experience. And frankly, it's been a little tough trying to do our startup stuff with Pagebound and like balancing responsibilities with just trying to grieve and get over things. Like you only have so much brain space. And we figured, hey, we'll just be a little bit honest this week and talk about what's going on, talk about our relative experiences with breakups and heartbreaks in hopes that, you know, I'm sure somebody out there listening is also going through a breakup, and just know that you're not alone. It's such a human experience that we can all relate to. So
I won't be sharing anything currently since I am still married. I am not going through a breakup.
Well, damn.
But I'm happy to share some of my earlier experiences before I got with Avery. I started dating Avery when I was 24 and now I'm 31. So it has been some time, but I've definitely been through my fair share of traumatic relationship experiences. So I'm definitely happy to open up, and probably frankly it'll be a little bit easier for me to share details just because I'm not going through it right now, unlike Jennifer. So Jennifer, obviously only share what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I'm not going to be sharing details about my ex or what happened, just, you know, to respect privacy. And it's not really even about that. I mean, damn, I could like really pop off on some details, but we're not going to. We are going to remain above. But yeah, Lucy, when was your first big heartbreak, or how many big heartbreaks have you had?
I would say the first person I really, really fell for and like thought I had a future with was this guy that I dated when I was a senior in college. And although we had a short relationship, it was only probably a year of actually dating, he was 1 year younger than me. So when I graduated in 2015, we still had plans to stay together and like have a long distance relationship. He was going to school at Michigan and I was going to be living in Chicago and like starting my first job. We were even talking about wedding rings and like a future wedding. Not that we were going to get married anytime soon. I mean, we were obviously both so young, but I went into the summer thinking like, yeah, of course, we're staying together. We're going to put in this effort. And then I had all this travel planned in the summer. I was going to India for 4 weeks and then China right after. And I went on this India trip where I was actually working because I was like a TA for a Michigan trip that was going to India. So I arrive in India and then he FaceTimes me. I don't know, maybe it was even Skype. Like it was a while ago. And he tells me, I think we should break up. And I was truly shocked. Like I totally did not expect that to happen. I was devastated. It felt like it came from nowhere. And then that whole trip was so difficult for me because not only was I in a foreign country, but I was also like technically working. So I had to be very fine during the day. And not only was I like working 9 to 5, quote unquote, but I was also like living with the professor who was leading the trip. I was living with these 20-ish Michigan students who were like undergrads.
Oh my
And,
God.
you know,
Like
they were seeing me.
hell.
Yeah, they were seeing me at dinner, like after hours. We were all like staying in a hotel together. And I just had to be like so okay, even though I was so not. It was so hard for me to adjust to the jet lag, I remember, because I just like couldn't sleep. Obviously, like you're thinking through your whole relationship and like what happened. And I felt so blindsided. So I was just like, I don't even understand what went wrong. And I was like thinking through every aspect of our relationship or why he felt that way. And it was really, really hard for me to accept it at first. And then so I wasn't sleeping. So I wasn't getting over the jet lag and I wasn't eating. And it was just like it was a horrible time. It was a horrible time.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that sounds terrible. I know, because one of like the hardest things that I've found is having to kind of put on a face that you're okay just to like get through your days. But if you don't even have time to just go into your room and be by yourself because you're living with these 20 other people and trying to work, wow. That sounds terrible.
Yeah, looking back, that was my first true test. I had relationships before that, but I felt like I was never that invested in them. And that was my first time when I truly was like, I'm heartbroken. And in a way, I was like, it's kind of good to know that I can feel this. I'm glad I experienced that because it means that I really, really loved that person. And then later in life, when I was trying to figure out who I was going to end up with and obviously dating more, I knew that's the kind of love I wanted to feel again.
Wow, you and I could not be more different. I'm just like a ball of mush. I'm very feely. I'm a hopeless romantic. I've gone through probably two or three. Like, this might be my third heartbreak, and this is probably the worst for sure. But I don't think the problem has ever been like, oh, am I not going to feel enough? It might be, am I going to feel too much?
Yeah.
I think this has been really hard for me specifically because I'm 30 years old, and you kind of associate deep heartbreak like this with being in your 20s, maybe even like your late teens. And I was engaged. I thought I thought my life was set, and to not be engaged anymore, going through like such a horrific heartbreak at this age it's so awful in a different way, because I know it's going to take me time to get over it. And it's going to take time to like just even baseline feel okay again. And then it's going to take time to like feel like I can open up to another person again. And then I'm going through this secondary grief of my life is now completely different than what I thought it was going to be, because all of that bumps up into timelines of like, how late in my 30s is it going to be before I meet somebody? Like, the way that I thought my life was going to pan out is just so different than how it is right now. So like, it's this double whammy of grief over the person, over like my life, over just completely being like scared and uncertain about what the future holds. And of course, you're like, oh my God, am I going to end up alone? Will I ever meet somebody again? It is comforting to know that most people feel that way after a breakup. You think that you're never going to meet somebody ever again. Like, the reality is you're not going to meet somebody like your ex again. That connection is special in its own way. But I keep trying to remind myself that like, just because that was special and unique in its own way doesn't mean that there's not going to be something that's a better fit for me out there that is also special and unique. And I mean, try to be positive about it, just telling myself like, how lucky am I that I get to like fall in love again? Hopefully.
It's been so hard to watch you go through it, and how I've thought about it, and I've said this to you before, is just like, I mean, we're friends, we're also collaborators in so many aspects. We make this podcast together, but we also have a business together, and I feel so much for you, for sure. But I also fully recognize that I can't 100% relate, and I've just been like trying to give you this space, because I do think at the end of the day, what is most important is if you're happy as a person and like who you end up with. Those kinds of life decisions, everything else is secondary. Even though like we both really want Pagebound to succeed and we both really want this podcast to succeed, you can only do those things if you're well mentally and if you are happy. And like ultimately, I think what is going to make us very happy 80-year-olds is not the success of our business or the success of our podcast, but rather like if we want a partner to find that and like have a really, really healthy relationship. And I can't even imagine how challenging it would be to turn 30. I mean, I had my own crisis when I turned 30 around my career, but be single and like also be starting your own company and like all of those things. Yeah, it's just super hard.
Yeah. I remember when we first started doing this and like I quit my job, one of the things that we mutually felt, we were like, thank God that we have our partners and that like that part of our life feels stable, because it would be so hard to do this if everything was out of whack. And I'm living my worst fear with it. I feel like I don't have any part of my life that feels figured out or stable. And on top of that, I'm grieving. It's not just like, oh, it went away. It's like, no, I'm like shattered over the fact that it went away and I have to rebuild. And that's really hard. And like, even if my ex was not the person for me, like you have this idea in your head, especially when you're engaged, you're like, okay, this is my soulmate. There was a lot of time that I genuinely believed he was the only man in the world for me. And now I have to just take away all of those beliefs and say, I was wrong. And so it makes it really hard to trust yourself again. It's hard because even talking about these emotions, I want to go into details, but I want to respect privacy so badly. So it's really hard for me to talk about it. I feel myself hesitating, and it's not because I don't want to share. It's just like the details of it are not relevant, I don't think.
It's been some time. I mean, you're still in the thick of it, and it's also still been a lot of time, right? Like you've been going through this now for how many months?
Almost a year, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, transparency to our listeners that have been listening for a while. Like when I had my panic attack last year, I think it was in
spring
April.
Last year.
Yeah, it was like spring last year. So about a year ago. That was fully because of this relationship. Let's just say I was having to suppress a lot of emotions because they weren't received well. So that like resulted in a panic attack. And that kind of forced me to start talking about things and start confronting things. And that's why we went to couples therapy. And that's why we did our couples therapy episode. So you guys have low key been along for the spiral of this. And we broke up over the summer, and then I reached out to get back together. And we did for a few months, but it didn't work out. We broke up back in November, and I reached back out again about a week ago. And long story short, I got rejected in the most brutal fucking way you could imagine. So we've been dealing with that. And this was not out of the blue. It was a long downward spiral. In some ways, that almost makes it worse because you can think of so many points where you have a regret or you're like, I should have handled this differently. And I'm somebody who tends to take on a lot of responsibility and accountability for things going wrong. Like, I don't look at my partner and say like, oh, he did XYZ wrong. I'm looking at myself being like, what could I have done better? Piling the blame onto myself, which has made this really hard for me. And part of what I have to like truthfully work through in therapy is try to focus more on how my needs aren't being met, how like I don't feel good, how the way I'm being treated makes me feel, rather than focusing so hard on like what I could have done better and what I did wrong, because that's just like your brain's way of trying to keep you safe and figure out what you did and try to like go back and change it. But the reality is like you can't go back and change it. There's a part of like radical acceptance that has been really hard for me, but I'm really trying to figure out how to just say like, I accept where I am, like what happened, like no amount of me thinking about this is going to change the outcome. And so I just need to like let it go and realize that it's not all my fault. There were two people in this. And no matter how much I want to like go back and like try to figure out the magic arrangement of words that'll make this thing better, that's not real. And
yeah. I want to ask, since you have been heartbroken before, does it feel different this time around compared to previous breakups? I mean, obviously you were engaged, but if you were to like, just take that seriousness away, is there something about this situation other than the fact that obviously you were together for 4 years, you were engaged, like all of that, that is also different?
Yeah, it feels a lot like my very first heartbreak, which was when I was 18. I broke up with my long-term boyfriend because we went to different schools. We had been dating since 8th grade. So it was a long time. And it was like, we like thought we were going to get married, all the things. He was very sweet. There was nothing wrong with him. I was scared of getting married to the first person I had ever dated. I was like, how do I know you're the right one? So basically I broke up with him, felt so much relief, and then felt so much regret. And I tried to get back together with him and he wasn't having it. And he ended up blocking me on everything. I went through like a good 7-8 month period of just complete grief, to the point where my friends were reaching out to him and being like, can you talk to her? Because like, this is really bad. And this feels similar to that because my ex blocked me on everything after we broke up. And I think there's, especially being much older, you think you're more mature at this age. You're in an extremely serious relationship that ends. To be discarded and blocked right away was so deeply painful. And I think the reason that some of my other relationships that ended weren't as painful as this is because you go through this detachment period where it's like, oh, maybe you see each other like every 2 or 3 weeks for a little while, or you can like talk through what happened and you don't hate each other and there's no ill will there, but you have this de-escalation detachment period. And I didn't get that. It was like one day we're engaged and we're fighting for it. The next day I'm blocked on everything. And it's just, you feel like a piece of trash that was thrown away. And I know he didn't do it to be mean. He did it because he thinks, I don't know, I think he like read a breakup book and was told that was the right way to do it. But I'm sure that was for like 21-year-olds who are breaking up with their like 4-month girlfriend, not like when you're fucking engaged and break up with somebody. But I think it was just kind of a very wrong way to handle it and put me in a really like shitty position where you have the emotional side of the breakup. There's also a mental side where you're trying to figure out what went wrong and like what exactly happened and how the other person's feeling. And we're all problem solvers. And if you have an overactive brain, especially, your brain is just going to like try to attach onto those unknowns and figure them out. And you can really help yourself and help the other person in the situation if you just talk about it. Like, I'm very big on just talking about those things instead of overthinking them to death. And I wasn't afforded that opportunity. So I think that's been putting me in just like a really difficult mental space.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's not what I thought you were going to say, but that makes sense.
Really? What did you think?
Well, I didn't know about that previous breakup with the blocking, but I feel like there are certain similarities between what I know about your relationship with your ex, which obviously I don't know everything. Like, I don't even live in Nashville. So, I mean, I met him like maybe once, but I felt like there were similarities between your relationship with your ex and then my relationship with an ex of mine that I felt was pretty emotionally manipulative. And for me, this was after that relationship I already talked about where I was really in love with him and we broke up, but he was a good person. maybe the way he broke up with me wasn't the best, but still, I look back on that and I'm like, okay, like, there's nothing I can pinpoint that I'm like, it was your fault or you did something wrong, right? It was just like, it didn't work out. Whereas I had a relationship right after that one that was very, very intense in a way that I had not experienced before. I felt like, again, it wasn't 100% his fault. Like, we both obviously share responsibility, but our personalities just brought out something in each other that was very toxic, to the point where, like, we broke up, we got back together, we broke up, we got back together. Like, it was just this horrible, toxic cycle. And we fought so much. I'd never been like that in a relationship. And I never have since then, because it was just something very toxic about the two of us. And I did feel like very emotionally manipulated. And so then when we broke up, I was upset. I was devastated, but it was in such a different way compared to the other breakup that I'd felt. So that's what I was wondering, is if it felt different for you this time around because of the way that you guys were towards the end. Like, I'm sure it wasn't always like that, but I feel like the timeline that you just shared with everybody, the past almost year of the boomerang, getting back together, breaking up, getting back together, breaking up, like, if that made it worse somehow or different now.
I'm too in it to know right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've just never experienced something like this before in general. So I think that's why it feels very uniquely painful. But in some ways, it makes it easier because I'm like, okay, this isn't a flippant thing. This isn't like one day we had like a bad month and we broke up. It was bad for a while. So that part makes it almost better. But then on the other side, there's so many opportunities at which you can see things going differently. Oh, if only I had said this, if only he had done this, dozens of times throughout the past year. So that part makes it really hard too. It makes it very easy to like live in the past and relive all of these moments where something could have turned for the better and it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a very mental thing to say, but like on a more emotional level, I think I find myself reliving fights all the time. And I'll be sitting in the shower or like brushing my teeth, and I've tried to be so much more mindful because I realize that I spend so much time in my head fighting and trying to make myself heard and understood. Because part of that's been really difficult is I feel like so deeply misunderstood and like misrepresented. So that part has been like extremely painful. And so like I will like sit there in my head and like fight with him and like try to like get him to understand me. So it is a lot of living in your head for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of being in like a high conflict situation where you don't feel like you are heard, it's like a very, very human response. And one of the things that, if anybody out there is going through something similar where you feel like you're living in your head a lot too, or just like fighting with somebody in your head, like honestly, for a long time, I didn't even like realize that was going on, just because like you're so in your grief and you don't realize that your head is not living in your present moment. But once I started realizing that and being like, I want to let go of this anger, this isn't serving me anymore. I really want to let go of this and just move on with my life. I've had to like learn how to redirect my thoughts and like interrupt the thought pattern, and just even like recognizing how often I was thinking about him or thinking about the situation was mind blowing. It was like, I'm literally not even living my life. I am living in my head. And I have been sitting and trying to do meditations, clear my head and sit. And from those, I've been getting little mantras that just come up. One of them has been, I release and I surrender. Like I release the situation and I like surrender to the moment. Whatever comes up, I surrender to like whatever life is going to throw at me next, and not try to like hold so tightly onto control in my head and try to like figure it out or like try to like figure out how I can change the situation. Just like surrendering to the moment. So if you're finding yourself in a situation like this, highly recommend trying to figure out a mantra like that to stop the thought pattern and redirect it. Because one of the things that's so difficult is you can't control what pops into your head. Like I can't control the fact that I'm fighting with them in my head and that it's popping up, but I can try to redirect it once it does happen.
Yeah, that seems really healthy. I didn't even know that was a thing. I've tried meditation before and it just never has ever worked for me. So.
I mean, it definitely doesn't really work for me either, but desperate times call for desperate measures.
Yeah. Yeah, no, when you were talking, I was thinking about that relationship when he broke up with me and I was in India and I couldn't sleep and I was just on his social media reading through all of our old messages and I just let it happen. I didn't do any of this healthy like redirect or meditate or anything. I was just obsessed, but at least I was in a different country. That was helpful. Like I wasn't in the same place where we had our relationship just by chance. And it was nice to just have distraction. So I am thankful for that. Although I was like around people 24/7, like the only time I was alone was like when it was nighttime. Like I was in my bed and I would be on my phone scrolling through all our shit. But at least during the day, like I had to be around people. So I think the distraction really helped me. I mean, I was not over it until the end of, like, this happened in the summer, and I was, like, probably finally truly over it fall of that year. So, like,
Like a season.
Yeah. And it helped that like I was in India and then I also was in China, gone that whole summer. And then I was also starting a new job and moving to a new city. So I had so much change and new things to look forward to.
Yeah, I've tried to look up how long it takes to get over a breakup. And Mel Robbins has a podcast on this. And have you heard of the Let Them Theory book?
Mm-mm.
It's become very popular recently. I always see girls in the cafes and stuff reading the Mel Robbins Let Them book. But it's basically this idea that like you can't control what other people do. So you just say in your head, let them, and then like, let me do something else. She wrote a book. One of the chapters is about breakups. Then her daughter, who was 27, was helping her research it. And she went through a breakup right as she started writing that chapter of the book. So very timely. And one of the things that they found through the research is you start to feel better after 11 weeks. So it's about 3 months where you're super in the thick of it. And then after that 11-week mark, you start to crawl out of it a little bit. I told you this earlier and you laughed and you're like, well, that would make you feel worse if you're not feeling better after 3 months.
Yeah, at 11 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I was at month 1 or month 2, I was always looking at March as like, okay, that's when I'm going to feel better. Like,
Yeah.
I can't even expect to feel better now.
Now it's March.
Well, we did have a backslide.
Sure.
So that was my own. It was necessary. It was necessary. But I think that is not universally true for everybody, obviously. But I feel like it's kind of a little bit true at the same time. Like if I were to ask you about your past breakups, you probably would say like, I mean, you just did. You said it took about a season.
Oh, yeah, 100%. The first month was definitely the worst. And then I feel like at 11 weeks, I remember I was with my mom in China and I felt fine like most of the trip in China by this point because I was in India for 4 weeks. That was the first month. And then I was in China, but I was, again, doing stuff. I was with family. I was having fun with my mom. And at the end of that trip, which was probably like 9-10 weeks, she asked me about it. How are you feeling? And I just burst into tears, like totally did not expect myself to. And I was like, oh, I'm not actually over it. Like, even though I felt pretty good this last month, I'm not actually over it. And then it was fall. I was moving to Chicago and then I felt like good. And then it was at 5 or 6 months that I was actually already dating. I was like, girl, I just moved to Chicago, like the big city, quote unquote, for me at the time. I'm going to date and like have fun. And I'm sure there was some residual because it's not like I made the smartest decisions during that period of time, but I was definitely not thinking about him anymore. Whereas like the first 3 months, 100%. The first month, it was constant. It was all the time. And then I think it receded a bit, but I was still definitely like emotionally there because then when it was triggered, I was still really upset. And then, yeah, I think the 3 months for me at least felt accurate.
As much as I feel horrible right now, I think it is a different kind of horrible. Like I'm entering acceptance, whereas before I was not. The reason that I even reached out a few weeks ago is because during that first 2.5 month period, almost 3 month period, there was a part of me that was still like, this isn't real. Like we're going to get back together. It was hopeful. And so I don't think I really went through that 11-week period truly grieving it. So I can't really like compare my timeline to that necessarily. But I think now, having gone through like the initial stages of grief during that time, I can enter the acceptance phase a lot quicker. I think I'm there. I think I'm at acceptance. I haven't cried in like a few days.
I like that that's what we're celebrating, but okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, there were definitely periods during the 3 months where I like didn't cry for like weeks at a time, which was great. But then it's not linear. That's the weirdest thing. It's like you go through weeks where everything's fine. Like I'm really focused on work. I feel like I'm getting my gym routines down pat. Like I'm so focused on myself in the future and moving forward. And then something would happen. It would be like I would go out, have too much to drink, and all of a sudden I'm like on my burner Instagram account stalking him and see something I don't like. And I'm back at square one. It's like the self-sabotaging behavior is so bad. You can't do it. You cannot do the self-sabotaging behavior. It's not worth it.
Yeah, it's so hard to control though. Like, you
It's
know,
so hard to control.
mentally you shouldn't be doing it. But I find like having been in my fair share of good relationships, and also I guess I have this one experience where I did feel like it was pretty toxic. I knew it was toxic the entire time I was in that relationship after it had gotten bad. My friends would tell me like, why are you with this person? And I knew it was bad. It wasn't like I didn't recognize it or that I was in denial. I knew it was unhealthy. I could see these behaviors that we were both doing and being like, that's really not healthy. And I've never done that before. So there's something about this that is like, obviously I'm not going to end up with this person. I never thought I was going to end up with them, but I still stayed with them. We still got back together all those times because when you have that kind of dynamic, the highs feel really, really high and then the lows are so low. And every time you're in a low, you are chasing the high. So it's just your emotions become like it's no longer a mental decision at all. You can be clear-headed and feel great and like rationalize it, but then you're like emotionally addicted to that person. So I don't know. I think so much about like relationships, breakups. It's not, I don't even know how you would therapize yourself or like teach yourself techniques to like get over it. Cause I think so much is just letting time pass until the emotions feel less strong. In my experience, even if I can like rationally, and people know who listen to this podcast, like I'm a very rational person. Usually logic persuades me. And yet when you're in the thick of it like that, whether you're still in the relationship or it's just ended, for me, it's always the emotion. The emotion needs to like peter out and like more time needs to pass for me to even start to let the rational mind in.
Yeah. I mean, it takes so long though. You got to do something in the meantime. That's been my experience because like, damn, I can't just like sit here in it for months at a time. It's so brutal. It's so brutal. My therapist, who I love, Jerry, we had a conversation about different ways that you handle a breakup. And he has this little phrase that you handle the end of relationships in one of three ways. Either you erase it, you replace it, or you embrace it. And so erase is like, it's primarily men who do this, who have like a 20-year marriage. They get divorced and they're in their like 50s and they don't talk about their wife. They don't talk about their previous marriage. It's like that never happened and just move on and like literally erase it from their lives. The replace method is when you just hop into another relationship, you date a bunch, you're trying to fill the void that person left. And it's a way to distract yourself, but it's a way to avoid the pain. Or you embrace it and you sit with the pain for as long as you need to, integrate it, learn what you need to learn, and then you are actually fully healed. And then you can give yourself to somebody else. I've been like forced into embrace. I quite frankly would love to replace, but you know, I downloaded the dating apps and I like cried for 3 days after seeing what else was out there. So I physically cannot replace.
I've definitely done all three of those in different relationships.
Yeah, honestly, replacement works great. I love a replace.
That's your usual go-to, isn't it?
My usual go-to is replace. Yeah, for sure. For sure, replace. I love replacing. The thing with replacing, though, I was talking to Jerry about it, is when you do have a breakup eventually, like there's going to be a breakup that breaks you. And it's the culmination of all the shit that you never dealt with before.
Yeah, and this is that for you.
I don't know.
Oh, no, you want it to be. Don't say you're going to have another breakup in the future. That's worse.
Oh, but I don't think it's a culmination. Like there was only one breakup that I replaced. And it was actually like the breakup that was right before my ex-fiance. I literally went through that breakup and like was with my ex like 3 weeks later. So that was definitely a replace. But I was over that so quickly though. That was so easy to get over. And like, yes, the replacement definitely did help. But like, I don't think I'm like secretly grieving both of these relationships right now.
No. I think it's more like, I guess like how I interpreted what Jerry was saying was less that it's the culmination of all your feelings about all these men that you hadn't dealt with, but more like your culmination of how it made you feel about yourself. You know what I mean? Like when you have a breakup with someone, of course you're mourning that relationship, but it also, I think what makes breakups different from just other types of grief or like the stages of getting over a relationship different from like the 5 stages of grief is like it's related to your ego, how you think about yourself. And how that person perceived you, who you thought knew you the best in the whole world and like loved you. Coming to terms with that is jarring in and of itself because it's like you said, you trusted your judgment. You trusted that you had found your person. And then now you're like, do I even trust myself? There's all of those questions that do build up, I think, over time, over many relationships that don't work out, right?
Totally. Yeah, I think one major lesson that I'm taking from all of this is to take your time in relationships. My next relationship, I'm not going to jump in after a week or move things really quickly. I think it really takes time to know somebody and you have to pay attention to people's actions and not their words. And that is unfortunately something that I had not learned in all of my 30 years. You want so badly to believe what people tell you and nope, it's their actions that really matter. I also think it takes a year to really get to know somebody. Like you want to go through all the seasons with somebody first before you can really know them. Huge ones.
Yeah. I feel like we've talked about on the pod your story of meeting your fiance and how you guys got engaged so quickly and Jerry being like, maybe you should rethink this.
Yeah. I didn't want to hear it though. I was so convinced. It is what it is. It was a really fun experience and like,
yeah,
I don't regret having it. Like I got to have this whirlwind, incredible romance that taught me a lot. taught me a lot about what I do and don't want or like can and can't tolerate, and taught me a lot about myself too. So there's those lessons, but I think, yeah, definitely not rushing into anything in the near future or ever. It's going to take some time. I also think like if you're somebody like me who tends to focus on their own shortcomings and like bear the burden of responsibility for conflict and things going wrong, I think it's really important to step back and think about how is somebody making me feel, and like actually think about how you're feeling and how you're thinking, and not just focus so much on how you're making somebody else feel. It's a very empathic thing to do, but it can put you in a really gnarly situation. You're looking at me like you don't know what that's like. You're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I don't think I have personal experience with that challenge, but I would say listening to Rachel Kirkconnell talk on Call Her Daddy was very eye-opening for me, because I feel like we've obviously had, discussions about this, and then to hear her say it, and like literally some of the things that she said, Jennifer has literally said to me. And I was like, oh, okay. Because I don't think that way. Hearing her say it, the dots are connecting about, yeah, I think women are sometimes just too giving. Or at least you and Rachel are.
I think it's like so normal though. I mean, not that you're abnormal, I don't mean it that way, but I think there are just like a lot of women, we're just nurturing. We want to make people feel good. It's just so ingrained in us, and we're socialized that way.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're a high achieving woman in any capacity, like you're taught that if you work hard, if you take responsibility, if you're accountable, you can make it, and you bring that into a relationship. And so you think you can work at it and just bear the brunt of responsibility, put your own feelings to the side for like the sake of the team and all of that. And at a certain point, it becomes very easy to lose yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm trying to think if maybe I did feel that way when I was younger. No, I don't think I ever felt that.
Well, this is why you're married and I'm not, so.
No. I think it took me a long time to feel like I was a catch. I don't think I was that confident in college, but definitely by the time I graduated college, I was like, I'm the best. Like, anybody would be lucky to be with me. And I think that has helped me balance maybe that side of things. Because I agree, I feel similarly socialized just being a woman in America. And I'm not saying I never put up with bad behavior, because obviously I did. I was in that toxic relationship where the behavior was very bad, and definitely I shouldn't have accepted it, but I did. But I think I was always able to be pretty clear-eyed about what was on them. I think I could admit what was on me in terms of my bad behavior, but I never like took responsibility for their bad behavior. I mean, I'm not going to end up with them, and I always knew that if it was a bad situation like that, I would never end up with someone who would treat me poorly in any way. Yeah, and I'm very happy in my marriage now, and Avery's amazing, and I think everybody deserves that. Like, I really do, which is why I'm like, when I look at your relationship, part of me is like, thank God. Thank God you guys did not work out, which I know you don't feel that way right now, but like one day you will. And I guess I feel like that was kind of the dynamic also with the Call Her Daddy interview. Rachel, for those who have not seen this one, you should go watch this. It was a wonderful interview. And she was so brave for coming on the show just weeks after her breakup, after being with this man, Matt James, for 4 years. And you could see she was visibly still in the thick of it. Like, it came as a total shock to her when he broke up with her. And I think she was still like, I mean, she was making a lot of excuses for him. You could kind of see maybe, I mean, obviously you don't know everything, but it seemed like that was probably a lot of their relationship dynamic when they were together, was that she was always apologizing for him, to him. Her feelings mattered less, all of these things. And Alex Cooper, who she's married and she was interviewing Rachel, she was like, one day you're going to realize that like you did not deserve any of that. Like, you deserve so much better, right? It just takes the time to have that distance to be able to see that. And I feel like in that interview, Rachel was she still loved him, obviously, it just happened. And I mean, the things that I'm referencing when I'm saying you have said similar things to me was like literally about fights in the relationship where she said, oh, this thing happened, and then I was the one apologizing. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that sounds eerily similar to what I've heard from Jennifer.
And also what she said is she would be the one that ends up apologizing and then being told that she's defensive and can't take accountability and can't apologize. So then if she ever pushed back on anything that he said, or like wanted to, I don't know, add some nuance, add her perspective, maybe be like, hey, that's not how that happened, she was labeled as somebody who couldn't take accountability and couldn't apologize. And that was very much what happened to me, to the point where I like don't know what's up and down anymore. I'm like, oh my God, am I this awful person who like can't see myself clearly? Like, I don't understand anything. And I feel like that's where Rachel was in that interview too. Like I watched it 2 times back to back because I was like, holy shit, I feel like I'm watching like myself in real time. And she's just apologizing still and being like, well, yeah, he got mad at me for like the dinner wasn't great, but I was really too upset about it and I should have done better. Like she's still over explaining herself. And like at no point is she like, I was allowed to feel upset and he didn't comfort me. It was, I shouldn't have been upset, and just taking all the accountability. Yeah. That me. I'm Rachel. Rachel is me.
But like, see, you can see it in her situation and it's like so obvious to you, right? Like, I feel like it's so easy to see it in other people, but when it comes to yourself, when you're in the thick of it, you don't even realize you're changing or like that you're adapting to the situation you're in. Because that's how you're making it work with this person. You are appeasing them. And then over time, that becomes a habit, a pattern that you just fall into.
Yeah. Especially if it's like not safe to have an opinion or like not safe to like inject your own self into something, you suppress it. You do. So this is definitely a journey of like finding what I think my voice, not letting it be like overshadowed by another person now. But I will say, like I have been talking to some men's. We're getting back out there a little bit. This is therapist approved. This is not replacement. Frankly, at this point, I just need to know that there are other men out there. So we have been dating a little bit. And just the act of chatting to these guys, trying to get to the date and swiping right or left, the discernment that is needed is unreal. It's unreal. And I actually feel so proud of myself because I've clocked so many red flags immediately and just cut it the F off. And I'm like, I don't know why I can't apply the same discernment to my ex, but you know what? At least I'm doing it going forward. It's so easy. I have some stories already of people just being insane, but it is like bad out there. It is really bad out there.
I don't know how it is out there.
It's bad. Which also makes it hard to like accept the end of a relationship. She's like, well, was it as bad as this? What I'm seeing out there in the wild is pretty fucking bad. Like, was that worse? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm going on a date tonight though, so that's great.
Oh, are you excited about it?
I am. It's a second date.
Good.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been married now for almost 4 years. And I've been with Avery since I was 24, so 7 years. And sometimes I'm like, oh, like I miss the feeling of like the early days. You know, it's not like enough for me to end my marriage, obviously, but like there's something really magical about first falling in love with someone. And so I do think to have that in your future it's something to be excited about. It's not just talk. Like I actually think that's a really, really special part of a relationship and I'm never going to have it again. You move into a different phase and whatever, but like, I mean, as a flirty girl, I was always a flirty girl. There is something so fun about flirting and like the honeymoon phase and the butterflies and like all you want to do is spend time with that person. And it's because you don't know them that well. That's why it feels that way, right? So it's very hard to like recreate that in a long-term relationship. So I don't know, you have that ahead of you still and that'll be fun. We're going to face a different set of challenges when it comes to work, when it comes to that point in time, because you're not going to want to work because you're going to be in love.
Oh my God. Hopefully. It's so
but not
hard
for
to
a while.
imagine.
You need to take at least a year off. So
I don't
by
know,
then,
girl.
Pagebound will be really successful. So you can be off doing whatever.
I have a ticking time clock here. I don't know if I can not date for a year. But I'm going to be like,
well, you can date
40 by the time.
You need to take the time to embrace so that you do
Overall,
not
replace. We've embraced for sure. No, I don't think I'm at risk for replacing at all. My litmus test for if I'm like ready to start dating again, which I do feel like, I mean, like I said, I don't like being on the apps, but I think that's just because the apps are terrible, not because I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sad I can't be on the apps. But I am worried that like if something goes wrong, like if I like somebody and I get rejected, it'll just be like a compounded heartbreak. And I'm like, okay, that's when I know I'm not fully over it yet.
Yeah.
If I feel like, oh, I can withstand any loser guy not wanting to go on a date with me, then I think we'll be okay.
You think you're going to be able to tell that before it happens, though?
No, God, no.
Yeah.
I'm going to figure that out after the fact.
That's why you need to take it slow.
I've only gone on 3 dates. One of them was okay, but I declined a second date. One of them was so bad, I had to have my friend call me and make up an emergency so I could leave early. And then the other one is the one that I'm having the second date with. And I like him. So it feels good to know that there are other fish in the sea at minimum.
Yeah. It's been a long process. I hope you're on the end. I hope there's no more backsliding.
I don't know how there could be. I think that's why I'm like moving into acceptance because I'm like literally like there is no other possibility on this road. It's like the only thing left is the exit.
Yeah.
Well, this is honestly kind of cathartic to talk about And I'm glad that we get to like let the listeners in on what's going on. And, you know, if anybody else out there that's listening is going through a breakup, honestly, I would love to hear from you and gab about it. So you can find us at EcaPod on Instagram, like love getting people's DMs. So definitely DM us or email us at everythingiknowabouttpod@gmail.com. And if people have breakup stories and you want to send it in, it would be so fun to do a listener breakup story episode. So definitely send them in to us. Like that would be so fun to do. And then for anyone who knows somebody going through a breakup or like you're going through a breakup yourself, I just want to chat real quick about like what you can do to support the people in your life who are going through this. Honestly, the number one is just letting them vent to you about it. Because I think personally, I feel like a burden talking about it to other people. And like you talk about it once and you're like, okay, they're not going to want to hear about it a second time. But like to process it, you want to talk about it like 50 million times. And like that's how you need to get over it. So I had a friend that let me come over. We like had wine and just like let me talk at her for like 2 hours. And it was so nice. And she didn't make me feel bad about it. So just being that person for somebody in your life is so great. And then the other thing is don't tell people you got to love yourself first. Like just focus on loving yourself. That is like the worst thing that I've heard this entire time.
But what does that even mean?
The love you're looking for is really within you. And if you just love yourself, then it's bizarre. It's bizarre. Okay. I'm like, oh, are you telling me I'm like,
was that a person our age said that to you? Or was that like an older person?
I don't think anybody in my actual life has said this to me. But like, if you look up breakup advice stuff, it's the number one piece of advice. Everyone's like, well, you just got to love yourself. I have gotten the in-person advice from older people to focus on myself, which I think is different. But, or like, oh, I just got to be confident and like focus on myself. But I'm like, I don't have a failed relationship because I don't love myself. This isn't a reflection of my self-love or like I have to, I don't know, somehow I wouldn't be sad if I just like thought I was the shit or something. Like, I don't really understand how that correlates. So don't love that piece of advice. But anyway, just be there, let people gab at you, guilt-free, and check in on your loved ones. I did have one of my best friends sent me flowers on Valentine's Day, which was really sweet. Really sweet. So just, you know, like little thoughtful stuff like that.
Yeah. Has there been anything that you found as a resource? I know obviously you've been in the thick of it for many months. I mean, you have a therapist, but outside of that, have you found any resources that have been like particularly helpful?
My therapist is great. So like that has been amazing, but frankly, no. And I don't think I've been doing a great job, honestly, of finding different resources. All the books and reading and stuff I've done is more about like fixing things in myself that contributed to the breakup and like making sure the mistakes I made don't ever happen again. So it's less about getting through the breakup itself. But I think journaling is huge. If you have access to a therapist, therapy is amazing. But
you've been doing tarot.
I have. No.
Okay. I was like, I don't think that will help you when you told me you were doing that. But I was like, good to know that you've realized that.
No, I had to stop because everything was like, he's coming back. He still loves you. And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. So no, don't do tarot. I was trying to like psychically stalk my ex, be like, what is he thinking about me today? And like fucking pulling tarot cards. It's insane. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Oh, good. Okay. So we've moved past that phase.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, we're done with that. We're done with that. It is a fun skill, though. I'm glad you learned how to do it. No.
You sound a lot better.
I can put on a happy face.
Maybe
no,
I do
feel
faking.
Better. No, I do feel better. Like after like we reconvened, those first few days after, like it was wounded animal bad. But frankly, I like went on a good date and I accepted that this is totally over, and you let yourself be in that like awful, awful place for like 2 or 3 days. And then like you've cried it all out at a certain point. The well of sadness does not go on forever. It dries out at some point. And I think it just dried out. I literally like had no tears left to cry in like the most cheesy way possible, but it's just true. Like I let it all out and it was horrific while it was happening. But like, yeah, now I'm not crying anymore because like it's gone. It's over, you know?
Yeah. I used to think that like if you go back to a person, as someone who's gone back and been like the off and on thing, that it was like, oh, you just totally backslid. You're like starting from square one. But I think actually it's like very much a part of the process. By the time I broke up with that person who was toxic and we like totally stopped speaking to each other, I was like very much over it. Like it didn't cause me that much pain. And I think that's because although when we had gotten back together previously, it still felt like, oh, we're like all in this again. And like we're feeling all the good things again. it was never as good as the very start, right? Like it does chip
Yeah.
away. And so then by the time, yeah, I didn't feel anything by the end. So I think like, even though over this past year you've like struggled with getting back together and breaking up and getting back together, like I do think it's helped you get to where you are now
Yeah.
in this acceptance phase. Even the fact that you're ready to talk about it on the pod that's a big deal, guys.
It is a big deal. I mean, frankly, I wish I could go through this cycle again. Like, I think
What?
I could use a few more turns of the wheel. I mean, no, literally. I mean, every single breakup I've had, aside from one, has always been like very on and off. But I do think it's part of the cycle. And that's why they haven't been that painful. Like when you were asking about like the one where I was blocked and like we didn't break up and get back together again, because it's just like you have all the regrets and all the what ifs. But like ones where it was like, oh, we'd been on and off for a few months now. You grieve the relationship while you're in it, first of all. You know that there's nothing left for you, so you can just kind of move on. It's like when it feels like there's all this like unfinished business that it makes it really difficult to step away from. So I'm a big proponent of just like get back together, break up. I mean, if you get back together and you stay together, then like it was a mistake anyway. And like it's a good thing you got back together. And then if you break up again, well, then now you don't have any regrets. I think this whole like block people, cut off thing is not the right way to go. Be messy, get back together.
Advice from Jennifer. I don't know if that's the approved therapist advice, but I don't know.
I don't know. Jerry's kind of about it.
Really?
Yeah. Well, he's at the same thing you did, that it's like part of the process, because your heart and your head don't move at the same pace. Like your head might know this isn't right for me, but until your heart catches up and it's like, oh, wait, I don't actually like this anymore, you're going to be at this dissonance within yourself. So do what you got to do to make those two talk to each other.
I mean, it's working. I've only done that breakup on and off thing once. And it wasn't because I liked him that much. Like, I don't think any of my relationships I've been like so in love with them where I'm like, I'm not sure if this was the right thing. Like, even when I've been heartbroken, I've always known it was the right thing that we broke up. Because like, I'm the shit, you know? So like, if someone breaks up with me, I'm not getting back together with them. Like, what the fuck? Only when I was extremely emotionally manipulated and not myself did I get back with someone. I've never, in all my other breakups, ever gotten back together with them.
Were you the one who broke up?
Which one?
When you're like, I didn't get back together. Like, was it your decision to leave? And then you were like...
Well, both. Like, even the guy who broke up with me when I was in India, the story I told,
mm-hmm.
I was not over it, but I never reached out to him. I was stalking him 100%, but I never reached out to him.
Yeah.
And it just died. It fizzled. Or, I mean, it was already dead, but then I like moved to Chicago. So I don't know. I think like part of it is also like, I was like starting a new life. It's hard for me to say what I would have done if I was coming back to school for another year and I knew I was going to see him and all of that.
Yeah,
so.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's easier when someone breaks up with you, honestly, because you can just be like, fuck you. Why wouldn't you want me? It's a different kind of thing if you're the one making the decision to break up, because you're like, oh my God, did I make a mistake? And you can start second guessing yourself. I've only been dumped one time, and it was the one that was easiest to get over. So I was like, how dare you, quite frankly? Like, what? So I was able to get over that. All part of the process. Well, thanks, guys, for letting me vent. Heart going out to any listeners who are going through something similar. We will get through it.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoy the pod, we would love for you to give us a follow and rate us on Apple Podcasts, which helps us get the word out and reach new listeners. Our sources are available on Patreon, where if you choose to become a patron, you'll also get access to bonus content, our monthly book club, and our eternal gratitude.
If you'd like to get in touch or suggest a topic for a future episode, email us at everythingiknowaboutpod@gmail.com or DM us across all socials at EikaPod, that's EIKA pod. Thanks for listening and see you next week.